Hey everybody, welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And today's video is going to be another episode of our Blues Time Machine, some blues history. I know it's been a while, forgive me fellas, the time machine was in the shop getting the dilithium crystals worked on for the warp drive or whatever, I don't know. But anyways, when last we spoke, we were going to move out of the 1930s into the 1940s and start talking about some of the blues subject matter and blues artists from that era. But I want to take a little bit of a detour, a little bit of a tangent here before we completely leave the 1930s and talk a little bit about a few artists that we may associate with the blues, but they refer to themselves and were referred to by others as songsters, or in the case of somebody like Leadbelly, for example, referred to himself as a musicianer. Now, what exactly were songsters or musicianers? Well, in actual fact, they weren't much different than blues artists of the time. Blues artists at this point through the 20s and into the 1930s were basically folk singers. It's just that the majority of their repertoire was made up of blues standards, or what are now becoming blues classic songs, right? But at the same time, many of them were performing other pop songs of the day. Stuff that audiences, not only in juke joints, but in house rent parties, picnics, cookouts, fish fries, that sort of thing, people would come up and request that they played certain songs that were not necessarily blues songs. So guys like Leadbelly, for example, who considered himself a musicianer, or was known as a songster as well as a bluesman, he had literally hundreds of songs memorized. So he sang everything from children's songs and putting nursery rhymes to song, as well as blues and pop songs and protest songs as well. Now, other artists that were bluesmen but were also songsters were guys like Mississippi John Hurt. He sang standard blues songs, but he also sang pop songs and ballads like John Henry and that sort of thing. And I also want to quickly mention another name, and that would be Bukka White. Bukka White, many of us would consider him a Mississippi bluesman, and that would be true in most respects. But he as well was a songster because, again, he performed live and in recordings songs that were not necessarily considered blues songs. They were more of just standard pop tunes, or again, these ballads or songs about legendary figures. So why did this happen? Why did some of these guys get categorized as bluesmen? Well, during the late 30s and into the early 40s, this time period that we're talking about here, the popular music of the time, the sort of the trend, the hot music at the time amongst the African American community, not only in the South but in the North, were blues and jazz, and to some extent ragtime, although ragtime was starting to fall out of favor for this new and upcoming sound, this blues music. Because don't forget, at this point, blues had already sort of splintered off into these subgenres where you had boogie woogie and jump blues. So it was good time party music. It was danceable music and that sort of thing. So what would happen when guys like Mississippi John Hurt or Leadbelly or even Skip James would walk into a studio, all the studio heads wanted to hear and record were blues songs because that was what was in demand. And many of them said, well, you know, we have these other songs in our repertoire, I can do other stuff too. And a lot of the bigwigs were saying, no, we just want blues. So unfortunately, well, fortunately for us blues fans, but unfortunately for the sort of the entire musical picture of that time period, a lot of the songs that were recorded were just blues and everything else was sort of cast aside. And that's why you end up with guys like Bukka White and so forth being, for the most part, known as bluesmen, and the majority of their back catalogs being blues songs, for the most part. Okay, so I think that's going to do it for today and your Blues Time Machine here in Blues History. Next video, now we're officially going to step into the 1940s and also talk about some of the blues artists that were coming out of different areas, not only specifically Mississippi and the Delta, or even a little bit of what we alluded to in sort of the Louisiana region and Texas region, but guys from Georgia and Alabama and Kentucky as well. So stay tuned for that. But in the meantime, let us know what you think. Give us a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. And we'll talk to you again real soon. All right? Thanks a lot and have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.